Republicans have not just been talking about reducing costs and fraud and abuse in so many areas and in healthcare. We've been actually passing new laws to accomplish that urgent mission for the people, and we will continue to do so. So here's where we are by way of schedule, just so you know, you're following. And if you're not at home, if you're waking up to this good news this morning, the Senate's vote late last night of 60 to 40 opens the door now. The Senate is moving forward on an amended House CR, a continuing resolution, that will reopen the government until January 30th. Added to that are provisions to fully fund SNAP provisions through the end of the next fiscal year, which is September 2026.
Good morning to you, Speaker. Anyone up there to negotiate with?
There's not, Margaret. Good morning. Good to hear your voice. It's kind of quiet around here. It has been for the last several days, and it's very unfortunate because as we're talking, real people are being adversely affected around the country, and some in very substantial ways. I pray that more Democrats in the Senate will come to their senses and do the right thing, and when they have the next opportunity on Monday to vote to open the government, I surely hope that they will.
Well, you did send your lawmakers home to their districts, which suggests we've got probably another week ahead of us of this shutdown.
Okay, so Speaker Mike Johnson, you know, MAGA Mike just got absolutely embarrassed by leaders in his own party, and he's now standing there completely frozen with no idea what to do next. This is brutal to watch, people. We're talking about the Speaker of the House, the most powerful Republican in Congress, being publicly humiliated by his own colleagues, who are basically saying his entire strategy is a disaster. Johnson tried to play hardball on the government shutdown. He tried to slow walk the Jeffrey Epstein files vote. He tried to be the tough MAGA speaker who does whatever Trump wants. And it all blew up in his face so spectacularly that other Republicans are now openly going around him, ignoring his leadership and making him look powerless at the biggest moment of his speakership. Can you believe this? The guy who's supposed to be running the House of Representatives is getting outmaneuvered by his own members, criticized by GOP strategists, and boxed in by pressure from every direction. He's frozen. He's stuck, and he has absolutely no good options left. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Guaranteed back pay for all federal workers who have been made to endure these hardships over the last several weeks. And it also includes passage of 3 appropriations bills, which we're grateful to be moving through the process. That is the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs bill, it's the Agriculture bill, and the Legislative Branch bill.
Let me paint the picture for you because the details here are wild. We're in the middle of one of the longest government shutdowns in American history. This thing has dragged on so long that it's now the second longest shutdown ever. And what has Mike Johnson been doing during this crisis? He sent House members home. He kept the chamber dark. He held almost no votes. He basically surrendered control of the entire shutdown negotiation to the Senate while the House sat empty and useless. Johnson's own explanation for this strategy was embarrassing. He admitted his message was getting old. He said Republicans were just saying the same thing over and over, like the Speaker of the House is publicly acknowledging that his strategy isn't working and he doesn't know what else to do. That's not leadership, that's surrender, and everyone in Washington could see it. GOP strategists started going on the record saying Johnson's approach was reaching its limit. Political analysts described him as powerless and absent during the most important moment of his speakership. Members of his own party started looking for ways to go around him because they realized following Johnson's lead was political suicide. The Epstein files situation made everything worse. For months, Johnson tried to delay and slow walk any vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein documents. He used procedural tricks. He avoided scheduling votes. He basically did everything he could to prevent the House from taking action on transparency about Epstein's connections to powerful people. And why? Because the whole thing was politically messy. Because some Republicans didn't want those files released. Because Johnson was trying to manage competing pressures from different factions who wanted different things. But here's what happened. Members got fed up. They started organizing discharge petitions, which is a procedural move that forces a vote even if the Speaker doesn't want one. And the threat of those discharge petitions worked. Johnson got boxed in so badly that he finally had to cave and announce the House would move forward with the Epstein vote. His explanation was pathetic too. He told reporters he didn't want to be on record as not supporting maximum transparency. Like he's basically admitting he only moved forward because he was about to be embarrassed by his own members forcing the vote without him. That's not leading. That's being dragged, kicking and screaming into doing the right thing. And here's the really dangerous part for Johnson. The success of the forced Epstein vote has emboldened members to use the same tactics on other issues. They're now talking about discharge petitions for spending bills. They're talking about going around Johnson on Ukraine funding. They've realized they don't need the speaker's permission to get things done. They can just organize enough signatures and force votes themselves. That completely undermines Johnson's authority. What's the point of being speaker if your own members don't trust your strategy and are willing to bypass you whenever they want? Johnson is supposed to be the one controlling the floor, setting the agenda, deciding what gets voted on. But now his members have figured out they can take that power away from him whenever he's being too slow or too stubborn or too aligned with Trump's demands instead of their political survival. This is a speaker in crisis. This is a speaker who's frozen between Trump's hardline demands and the reality that his own colleagues think his strategy is backfiring catastrophically. The broader picture here is even more significant, because Johnson's struggles reveal something important about Trump's control over Capitol Hill. Trump wants certain things. He wants the shutdown to continue until he gets his demands. He wants loyalty on tariffs. He wants Republicans to follow his lead no matter what. But increasingly, Republican lawmakers are ignoring or softening those demands when they collide with their own political survival. They're not willing to go down with the ship just because Trump says so. And Johnson is caught in the middle, trying to please Trump, trying to please hardliners, trying to please swing district Republicans who are terrified of losing their seats. And he's ending up satisfying nobody. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into exactly how Johnson's strategy fell apart, why his own party is turning on him, what this means for upcoming fights on spending and policy, and whether MAGA Mike can survive as speaker, or if he's about to become the next Republican leader taken down by internal chaos. Let's break it down. Alright, so let's get into the specifics of how Mike Johnson's strategy completely collapsed and why he's now standing there frozen with no good options. The shutdown situation is where this really started falling apart. When the government shutdown began, Johnson had a plan, or at least he thought he did. The idea was to keep pressure on Democrats and the Senate by refusing to budge on Republican demands, hold the line, show strength, wait for the other side to blink. Standard hardball politics, right? But here's what Johnson actually did with that strategy. He sent House members home. He kept the chamber dark for extended periods. He held almost no votes on anything. He basically took the House of Representatives, the chamber he's supposed to be leading, and made it completely irrelevant to the shutdown negotiations. While the Senate was actively working on deals, while leaders from both parties were huddling to find solutions, the House just sat there empty. Johnson wasn't at the negotiating table in any meaningful way. He wasn't pushing legislation. He wasn't using the House's power to shape the outcome. He was just waiting and hoping that somehow the strategy would work without him actually doing anything. Political analysts started noticing this pretty quickly. One detailed breakdown of Johnson's approach concluded that his shutdown strategy was reaching its limit. The analysis pointed out that Johnson had sidelined the House at exactly the moment when he should have been most active. He looked powerless and absent during what should have been a defining moment for his speakership. And the criticism wasn't just coming from Democrats or the media. It was coming from Republican strategists and GOP insiders who were watching Johnson fumble and wondering what the heck he was thinking. Johnson himself seemed to realize things weren't going well. In public comments, he admitted that his message was getting old and that Republicans were saying the same thing over and over. Think about what that means. The Speaker of the House is publicly acknowledging that his strategy has become stale and repetitive. He's basically telling everyone that he's run out of ideas but doesn't know what else to do. That's a devastating admission from someone who's supposed to be leading the Republican majority through a major crisis. The rank-and-file Republicans started getting restless. Members who were sent home during the shutdown began wondering why they were sitting on the sidelines while their political futures hung in the balance. Swing district Republicans were especially nervous because shutdowns are terrible politics for incumbents in competitive seats. Voters blame the party in power when the government doesn't work, and these members could see their re-election prospects getting worse every day the shutdown continued. But Johnson wasn't listening to their concerns. He was focused on Trump's demands and hardliner priorities, not on the political survival of members who actually have to win competitive elections. That disconnect between Johnson's strategy and the needs of his own members created the conditions for revolt. People started looking for ways to go around the speaker because following his lead felt like walking off a cliff. Now let's talk about the Epstein files situation, because this is where Johnson's weakness became impossible to hide. The Jeffrey Epstein documents have been a hot topic for months. There's been massive public interest in releasing files that could reveal powerful people's connections to Epstein's criminal activities. Both parties have members who want transparency, and the political pressure to release these documents has been building and building. But Johnson tried to slow walk this whole thing. He used procedural delays. He avoided scheduling votes. He gave vague answers about when or if the House would act. And people started asking, why is the speaker dragging his feet on Epstein transparency? What's he trying to hide or protect? The longer Johnson delayed, the more suspicious it looked. and the more pressure built from members who wanted to get on record supporting transparency. Here's where Johnson's control started slipping away. Members began organizing discharge petitions. For people who don't know, a discharge petition is a procedural tool that allows House members to force a vote on legislation, even if the Speaker doesn't want to bring it to the floor. If you get enough signatures, 218, which is a majority of the House, you can bypass the Speaker entirely and bring a bill up for a vote. It's rarely successful because it requires members to publicly defy their own party leadership. But the threat of a discharge petition can be powerful because it signals that the Speaker has lost control and members are willing to go around him. That's exactly what happened with the Epstein files. Enough members started signaling support for a discharge petition that Johnson realized he was about to be humiliated. If members forced a vote without him, it would prove he lost control of his own chamber. So Johnson caved. He announced the House will move forward with the Epstein vote, trying to make it look like his decision rather than admitting he'd been boxed in. But his explanation gave away how weak his position really was. Johnson told reporters he was moving forward because he didn't want to be on record as not supporting maximum transparency. Read that carefully. He's not saying he moved forward because it was the right thing to do. He's not saying he moved forward because he believes in transparency. He's saying he moved forward because he didn't want the political embarrassment of being seen opposing it. He was scared of how it would look if members forced a vote without him. That's not leadership, that's damage control after you've already lost. And everyone in Washington noticed. The victory for discharge petition organizers sent a clear message. You can push Johnson around if you organize enough pressure. He'll cave eventually. You just have to make him more scared of looking weak than he is of defying Trump or hardliners. The consequences of that lesson are now playing out in real time. According to CNN reporting, the success of the forced Epstein files vote has emboldened members to consider similar tactics on other issues. They're talking about discharge petitions for spending bills to end the shutdown. They're talking about forcing votes on Ukraine funding that Johnson has been blocking. They've realized they have a tool that works, and they're willing to use it whenever Johnson's strategy conflicts with what they think is right or what they need for their own political survival. This completely undermines Johnson's authority as Speaker. The whole point of being Speaker is that you control the floor. You decide what gets voted on and when. You shape the legislative agenda. But if members can just organize discharge petitions whenever they disagree with you, that power disappears. Johnson becomes a figurehead, someone with the title of Speaker, but not the actual control that comes with the position. The internal GOP dynamics here are fascinating and terrifying for Johnson. He's trying to serve multiple masters who want contradictory things. Trump wants hardline tactics, keep the shutdown going, don't compromise, show strength. Hardliner members in safe red districts agree with Trump and want Johnson to hold firm, but swing district Republicans want the opposite. They want the shutdown to end. They want to look reasonable. They want to avoid being blamed for government dysfunction heading into their re-election campaigns. Johnson can't satisfy both groups. If he holds firm for Trump, he loses swing district members. If he compromises to help swing district members, he loses Trump and hardliners. So he's been trying to split the difference, and the result is that nobody's happy. Hardliners think he's too weak. Moderates think he's too stubborn. Trump allies think he's not doing enough. Pragmatists think he's doing too much. He's managed to unite everyone in frustration with his leadership, which is quite an achievement in the worst possible way. The 2026 implications of all this are huge. Because Johnson's repeated strategy failures on the shutdown, on Epstein, on spending mega bills are creating chatter about whether he can survive as Speaker. Republicans have already shown they're willing to take down their own speakers. They did it to John Boehner. They did it to Kevin McCarthy. Johnson was supposed to be the guy who could unite the fractious GOP conference, but he's proven just as incapable of managing the competing factions as his predecessors were. If Republicans have a bad 2026 midterm, if they lose seats because of shutdown politics or internal chaos, Johnson will get blamed, and there will be members ready to challenge him for the gavel, arguing that his leadership failures cost Republicans their majority or their chance to expand it. Johnson is skating on very thin ice right now, and every frozen no-win moment makes that ice a little thinner. Okay, let's break this down into clear points so you understand exactly what's happening with Mike Johnson and why it matters. Point number 1, Johnson's shutdown strategy has been a complete disaster that left him looking powerless and absent at the most important moment of his speakership. He sent members home, he kept the House dark, he held almost no votes. He essentially surrendered control of shutdown negotiations to the Senate, while the chamber he leads sat empty and useless. His own explanation, that his message was getting old and Republicans were just repeating themselves, was an admission that the strategy wasn't working and he didn't know what else to do. Political analysts described him as sidelined and powerless. GOP strategists said his approach was reaching its limit, and members of his own party started looking for ways to go around him because following Johnson's lead was hurting their political survival. This is what failed leadership looks like. The Speaker is supposed to be driving strategy, shaping negotiations, using the House's power to influence outcomes. Johnson did none of that. He just waited and hoped things would work out, and now he's dealing with the consequences of that passivity. Point number 2, the Epstein files situation exposed how easily Johnson can be pushed around when members organize against him. For months, Johnson tried to delay and slow walk any vote on releasing the Epstein documents. He used procedural tricks and avoided scheduling votes. But members got fed up and started organizing discharge petitions to force a vote without Johnson's permission. The threat worked. Johnson caved and announced the House would move forward. But his explanation that he didn't want to be on record as not supporting transparency revealed he was acting out of fear of embarrassment rather than genuine leadership. He wasn't choosing to do the right thing. He was being dragged into it by members who were willing to go around him, and that weakness is now public knowledge. Everyone in Congress saw that you can push Johnson around if you apply enough pressure. He'll fold eventually. You just have to make him more scared of the political embarrassment than he is of defying Trump or hardliners. Point number 3, the success of the forced Epstein vote has emboldened members to use similar tactics on other issues, fundamentally undermining Johnson's authority as Speaker. Members are now talking about discharge petitions for spending bills. They're considering forcing votes on Ukraine funding that Johnson has been blocking. They've learned they have a tool that works, and they're willing to use it whenever Johnson's strategy conflicts with their priorities. This is devastating for Johnson's power because the whole point of being Speaker is controlling the floor and setting the agenda. If members can just bypass you whenever they disagree, that power becomes meaningless. Johnson becomes a figurehead with a title but no actual control. And once members realize they don't need the Speaker's permission to get things done, it's very hard to put that genie back in the bottle. Johnson's authority has been permanently weakened by this episode, and he has no clear way to rebuild it. Point number 4, Johnson is frozen between Trump's hardline demands and the reality that his own members need something different for their political survival. Trump wants the shutdown to continue. He wants no compromises. He wants loyalty and toughness. Hardliner members in safe red districts agree with that approach, but swing district Republicans are terrified. They're watching their re-election prospects deteriorate every day the shutdown continues. They need the government to reopen. They need to look reasonable to voters in competitive districts. Johnson can't satisfy both groups because they want opposite things. So he's been trying to split the difference, and the result is that nobody's happy with him. Hardliners think he's too weak. Moderates think he's too stubborn. Trump allies think he should do more. Pragmatists think he should do less. He's managed to unite everyone against his leadership, which leaves him completely isolated and unable to build coalitions for anything. This is what it looks like when a speaker loses the confidence of his own conference. Point number 5, Johnson's repeated failures are creating serious questions about whether he can survive as speaker. Heading into 2026, Republicans have already proven they're willing to take down their own speakers. Boehner and McCarthy both got pushed out by internal revolts. Johnson was supposed to be the unity candidate who could manage the fractious GOP conference, but he's failing at that job just like his predecessors did. Every strategy faceplant on the shutdown, on Epstein, on mega bills, on tariffs adds to the narrative that Johnson isn't up to the job. If Republicans have a bad 2026 midterm, Johnson will get blamed, and there will be members ready to challenge him, arguing that his leadership failures cost the party seats or squandered opportunities. Johnson isn't just having a bad week. He's building a track record of weakness and failure that could end his speakership. Now let's talk about what this means for the bigger picture. Because Johnson's struggles reveal important things about Trump's control over the Republican Party, the conventional wisdom is that Trump controls the GOP completely, that Republican elected officials do whatever Trump wants because they're scared of his base and his ability to primary them. And there's some truth to that. But what we're seeing with Johnson is that Trump's control has limits. When Trump's demands conflict with members' political survival, when following Trump's lead means losing your seat, members start looking for escape routes. They soften Trump's positions, they ignore his demands, they organize discharge petitions to force votes Trump doesn't want. Johnson is caught in the middle of this dynamic because he's trying to be Trump's guy in Congress while also managing members who can't afford to be as MAGA as Trump wants them to be. The implications for upcoming fights are significant. If members are willing to go around Johnson on Epstein files, they might be willing to go around him on ending the shutdown. They might be willing to go around him on Ukraine funding. They might be willing to go around him on any issue where his strategy or Trump's demands conflicts with what they think is right or what they need politically. That makes predicting what will happen in Congress much harder because the normal assumption that the speaker controls the floor doesn't apply when the speaker is this weak. Johnson can announce a strategy, but members might just ignore it and do their own thing. That chaos and unpredictability is going to define House Republican politics for the foreseeable future. Here's the bottom line. Mike Johnson is a frozen, weakened speaker who's lost control of his own chamber and his own members. His shutdown strategy left him looking powerless and absent during the biggest moment of his speakership. The Epstein files situation exposed how easily he can be pushed around when members organize against him. The success of discharge petition threats has emboldened members to bypass Johnson on other issues, fundamentally undermining his authority. He's trapped between Trump's hardline demands and the survival needs of swing district Republicans, satisfying neither group. And his repeated failures are creating serious questions about whether he can survive as Speaker heading into 2026. This is what happens when a MAGA-branded leader tries to please everyone and ends up pleasing no one. This is what happens when a speaker loses the confidence of his own conference and members realize they don't need his permission to get things done. This is what internal Republican chaos looks like, and it's going to define every major fight coming in Congress for the rest of this term. Johnson's frozen position should worry anyone who wants functional government, because when the Speaker of the House is this weak, when members are organizing to go around him, when his strategies keep failing, when he's stuck between competing factions he can't satisfy, nothing gets done smoothly. Every bill becomes a struggle. Every negotiation becomes chaotic. Every crisis gets harder to resolve because nobody knows who's actually in charge or what strategy will survive contact with the fractured Republican conference. That's the state of House Republican leadership right now. A speaker who can't lead, members who don't trust him, strategies that keep collapsing, and a constant threat of internal revolt hanging over everything. So stay tuned, because this MAGA Mike saga is far from over. The shutdown fight continues. The spending battles are coming. The 2026 election pressure is building. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Mike Johnson is standing frozen, watching his authority slip away while his members figure out they can do whatever they want without him. This is what leadership failure looks like in real time. This is what happens when you try to serve Trump and your members and hardliners and moderates all at once. You end up satisfying nobody and looking weak to everyone. Welcome to the chaos of House Republican politics. It's only going to get wilder from here.